Daily Devotion with Pastor Balla for March 1st, 2021, Special Confirmation Edition, looking at the 9th and 10th commandments from 1 Timothy chapter 6, verses 6 through 10. But godliness with contentment is great gain. For we brought nothing into the world, and we cannot take anything out of the world. But if we have food and clothing, with these we will be content. But those who desire to be rich fall into temptation, into a snare, into many senseless and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. It is through this craving that some have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many pangs. St. Paul writes to Timothy and us and starts this section with 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 6. But godliness with contentment is great gain. Let's first swap out that word godliness for faith. As Christians, we say we have faith. Faith with contentment is great gain, meaning that you will do well if you are content with what you have. But what does contentment really mean? It means to be satisfied with what you have, realizing you don't really need anything except for what God has already given to you. Let's go on with verse 7. For we brought nothing into the world, and we cannot take anything out of the world. How true! We didn't even come into this world with our own clothes. So regardless what treasure you think you can be buried with, you still can't take it with you to heaven. So St. Paul is reminding us that you can't bring it with you. You can't take it with you. Because heaven is 100% a pure gift. It's given for you. And all that you need and all that you have in heaven will be provided for by God Himself. Verse 8. But if we have food and clothing, with these we will be content. So this side of heaven, we need food and clothing, and God knows we need these things. And you have food, and you are clothed. But sometimes we ask, is this all that there is, God? Can't we have a little bit more? The answer is yes. God does indeed bless us beyond just food and clothing. However, with those blessings, there's also a caution. Those blessings may become attached to us, and we may desire to have more. So how far do we go with our wants and our desires? Well, consider the next verse. But those who desire to be rich fall into temptation, into a snare, into many senseless and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. What St. Paul is trying to teach us is that when we want more and more and more, we will never be satisfied. And that desire will continue to grow and drive us and pull us away from the greatest treasure of all, which is the gift of faith that you have because of Christ. So, would you be willing to give up the Christian faith for something else? Something else in this world? Maybe like an expensive car or a computer or a phone? It's that desire that St. Paul is talking about. That I must have it in order to, quote unquote, be living this life. And if that thing pulls us away from God, our desires might be so strong that they will pull them away from God. So St. Paul warns Timothy and us, be satisfied, be content with what God has already given you. Verse 10, for the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. It is through this craving that some have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many pangs. Notice that St. Paul says the love of money, not money itself. But when we start loving money and the things that money can buy, that's when we get ourselves into trouble. As St. Paul states, some have wandered away from the faith. However, money itself is not an evil. Money is a tool to acquire things, the things that we need in this world. So what's the difference between a strong desire and just acquiring what we need? When the desires get in the way of our Christian faith, that is when we break the 9th and 10th commandments, in which God reminds us not to covet. That strongly desires something that God did not intend us to have. But how do we know when we've gone too far? Well, my best answer for you is, can you afford it? Can you take care of it without sacrificing our salvation with God and the family that God has placed us in? Why do I say the family? Because God has given you a family. And if you're a husband and wife and you have children, then you need to take care of those children. And God is providing you the means to take care of those children. But if we buy something super expensive and we can no longer take care of our family, we are getting ourselves into trouble. So we need to be satisfied with the blessings that God has given, for God is a good gift giver. The devil, of course, will come by and try to tempt us. Try to tempt us with the message that God isn't the good gift giver, and that God isn't giving us what we deserve, what we think we deserve, I should say. And that the devil tries to convince us to go out and acquire this ourselves at any cost. Well, welcome to the 9th and 10th commandments, where God teaches us not to covet, but to be content, to be satisfied with God, what God has given to you here on earth. Join me again tomorrow as we hear about demons, part 2. God's peace and many blessings be with you, and thank you for watching, and please take an opportunity to share this video with others. If you have enjoyed these daily devotions, please consider making a donation to Peace Lutheran Church, 24024 West Main Street, Plainfield, Illinois, 60544. Thank you again for watching.